This is problem number 3 from section 3.1. In this problem, they say write the given expression in the form f of x equals a parenthesis x minus h squared plus k. Identify the vertex. And they give us a quadratic right here. Now, this form is what's called vertex form. And vertex form, the reason it's called vertex form is it actually tells you the vertex. The vertex is hk, and I have that written here. Vertex is hk. Now, h is negative here. I just want you to understand that that number is the x value for your vertex, but that number, because it says negative, the number is going to be the opposite sign. So let's say that this says minus 2 here. You'd actually write just 2 for h. And if it said plus 3 here, you'd actually write minus 3 here for h. You're just going to do the opposite sign for the h value. Now, how do we get an equation? This is actually standard form. How do we get an equation from standard form into vertex form? There's 2 ways to do this. First of all, we're going to use completing the square. And you have to be competent in completing the square for this course. So, completing the square. How do we do it? Well, first of all, to complete the square, and I'm going to write this out there, to complete the square, take negative b divided by 2a and square it. So remember, this is a, b, and c. We want to take the middle term, throw a negative on it, divided by 2 times the leading term, which is a, square it, and add that number to both sides. Okay. Let's start by writing the function f of x equals x squared plus 6x minus 14. Then let's do what this says to do. We're going to take negative 6, right, because negative b, over 2 times a, which is 1, and we're going to square that. Well, that gives you negative 6 over 2 squared. You get negative 3 squared, which is 9. Okay. And then it says take 9 and add it to both sides. We're going to add it to each side because that does not change the equation. So we're going to say f of x plus 9 equals x squared plus 6x plus 9 minus 14. Now we added 9 to each side. It did not change the equation at all because we added essentially some weight on the left side and some weight on the right side, and they're canceling each other out. They're equal to each other. Now, why are we doing this? Well, to go from standard form to vertex form, you have to get a perfect square in there, right? X minus a squared, perfect square. Well, x squared plus 6x minus 14 is not a perfect square, right? You can't factor that into 2 of the same thing. But by taking the middle term, dividing it by 2 and squaring it, you get a number that is a perfect square. You get a number that will give you a trinomial with a perfect square. If you look at x squared plus 6x plus 9, this is a perfect square trinomial. And that perfect square trinomial is, you would say x, we would say plus 3 squared. If you factor this down, right? So we take the factors of 9, basically that's 3, right? 3 times 3. X plus 3 squared gives you x squared plus 6x plus 9. On this side, we just write f of x plus 9 still. And you can see how we're working our way to this form, how that looks. The last step you do is take the 9 and subtract it over, and you get f of x equals x plus 3 squared minus, subtracting the 9 over, that's 23. So the vertex here is the opposite of this number because of the negative h. So that's negative 3, comma, negative 23. So we have it in vertex form, which they ask us to do, right? We have the vertex, which is the second thing they asked us to do. We've solved the problem. This is one way to solve the problem. The other way to solve the problem is to use what's called the vertex formula. Now you need to be probably pretty competent in this as well. Now notice the vertex formula is similar to what we just used for our completing the square. Right, negative b over 2a. Negative b over 2a is the first thing we do to start this. So let's do negative b over 2a. Negative b, which is negative 6 over 2 times a. Well, negative 6 over 2 is negative 3. So the x-coordinate for our vertex is negative 3. Okay, what's the y-coordinate? Well, the y-coordinate is going to be this function with an input of negative b over 2a, which is just the number we got there. So we take negative 3, and really we're going to say f of negative 3. Okay, so let's do f of negative 3, and when we do that, we get negative 3 squared plus 6 times negative 3 minus 14. This gives you 9 minus 18 minus 14, which gives you negative 23. So we end up with a vertex of negative 3 comma negative 23. So if you see here in this part, we found the formula first, then we wrote the vertex. Here we have the vertex, right? And now we're going to find the formula. So to find this formula, we're going to take the formula, which they already have it written on the top, but if you didn't have it written there, it's a x minus h squared plus k. And we're going to use this formula to write the equation. Well, a is our leading coefficient, which is 1, so we can say f of x equals, a is 1, so we don't even need to write it, x minus h, well, it's minus negative 3, so it's actually x plus 3 squared plus k, which k is not minus 23, so it's minus 23. You'll see we got the same answers, two different versions. Completing the square is one version, the other version is using the vertex formula. You need to be competent in both.